Hello and welcome to Quarterlight, your car brochure channel. And in today's episode, we're going to be looking at the Peugeot 505 Estate. Hello and welcome back to Quarterlight. Quarterlight, we're a car brochure channel here on YouTube, looking at car brochures from around the world for the 60s, 70s, 80s and 90s, and sometimes beyond that as well. So if you're interested in cars and car brochures, this might be the channel for you. And in fact, if you do enjoy it, please consider subscribing. It's completely free and really does help the channel. Anyway, back to today's episode, the Peugeot 505 Estate. Not too long ago, we looked at the Peugeot 505 saloons. A couple of people said, can we have a look at the estates? Of course we can. This channel is for you after all. So today we are going to look at a UK brochure for the Peugeot 505 Estate for 1982. So here it is then, the Peugeot 505 Estates brochure. And like I was saying in the introduction, not too long ago that we did have a look at the 505 saloons. And what lovely cars these were. And we even actually looked at an estate version actually. These unusual converted dangle 4x4s in that episode as well. So we have touched on estates, but like someone mentioned, we haven't just looked at the standard estates for these cars. So we're going to correct it today. But if you did miss this episode, I will do a little bit of a link at the end of today's episode. But here is today's brochure. Now, I've kind of like kept them separate really, because the estates were quite different from the saloons. The wheelbase was actually longer than the saloons to make it one of the most spacious cars in the market for the UK. In fact, it was the exact same wheelbase as the previous model, the 504 Estate. So the 504 had already proved to be a very popular estate car. In similar sort of guise, they had like the standard model and they had like a family model as well. In France known as the Break, the standard model, and the Familial being the family version with more seats at the back. Similar story with the 505. So really it's taken to the success story of making this really quite strong, robust family estate car and just moved it on to a bit more modern and a little bit of change of design obviously. I did like the 504, but I must admit I equally like the 505 Estates as well, and it's not many cars you can say that with the next model on, I find. Anyway, this is today's brochure, so let's concentrate on this. Let's turn to the back actually. The emblem on the back, which I think is quite nice, but if we just zoom in, there is a bit of a dealer stamp on this one. It's a little bit faded. It looks like it says HF Edwards & Co Limited, Upper High Street, Epsom in Surrey. Don't know if any of you remember that dealership or indeed what's there now. And we've just moved the camera to one side there. There is a date there, March 1982, and in fact these estates came out in spring 82. So this is a new brochure for these estate cars, but I always think are quite interesting, the first ones that come along. Also interesting I find is some cars have kind of like a little bit of taglines, some makers have taglines. At this time in 82, Peugeot 505, it's saying, "Take pride in precision." Not a little bit of a tag that I particularly remember. I always remember Ford, and Ford give you more, and Vauxhall, once driven forever smitten, but I don't remember that take pride in precision, but there we go. Anyway, let's open the brochure up and have a look inside. And as we do turn the page, we're introduced to this base model, the 505 Estate, in this rather attractive shade of metallic green. And I always think early 80s, These were the colours of the early 80s, weren't they? Like metallic blues and these metallic greens. And you saw them a lot on British Leyland cars as well, but I always liked that metallic green. And what a huge practical car these were. Really perfect cars for the family before really sort of minivans stroke people carriers took off. It was all about estates, wasn't it? And obviously before SUVs became super popular that they are today. Estates, that's what you had if you had a family. And these were huge in Europe. I mean by US, American standards, North American standards. They weren't that big, but certainly on European roads they were pretty big cars. And if you just zoom in there, we can kind of like see the badging on this base model, Peugeot 505 GR. Try to change the camera there just so you can see, but it does say GR on there. Well, I said the base model, in the saloons the GR was the base model, but actually this isn't really the base model. The GL was the very base budget version. I think there may be one picture of the GL in here. The GL didn't even have a wash wipe on it, which is unusual for an estate car. I'll mention that when we get to that though. And a little bit of an image. Hopefully the car isn't driving. I don't believe there is anyone in the driving seat there. But yeah, kids playing at the back, really showing how much room in the back of these big estates they really were. And if we go back to the main image, you can see, it's a long area there for your luggage on these particular models. And you can really see what a huge wheelbase they were. In fact, like I said, a similar sort of story to the 504 really. Same sort of principle, a really long wheelbase and lots of room in the back. The text tells us the 505 estate, the new Peugeot 505 estate. Remember, this is really very much a new car just come out. Takes its classical lines from the 505 saloon. It is elegant, modern and refined. And like all other Peugeot estates, it isn't just a modified version of the saloon. We spent 3 years developing the 505 estate right in its own right. And the result is a fifth door that opens up to reveal a massive load area, the largest volume capacity available in Britain today. So that really sums it up in many ways. It was a really spacious car for the market, and it's saying here the largest volume available in Britain, which is quite saying something. But they were huge cars. But also how they described it, they're developing the 505 estate in its own right. Like I say, it was quite different to the saloons, and I think that made it a winner really. Most other car manufacturers didn't really do a great deal to turn their saloon into an estate. And when I particularly think of things like Ford, they always were very, very lazy with their estates. But I think the French manufacturers knew that these estates were important cars. And of course Peugeot had the family version in there as well, with extra seats in the back, what in France they called the Familiale. In the UK we just call it the 505 family estate. Let's just zoom in. A little bit hard to actually make out the back seat on this image, but you can see it's forward facing. But certainly it was a big car, and they really made advantage of it being a big car at this time. And you can have lots of different seating arrangements. This first one, what is it, a 8-seater? Obviously not the most luggage space, but there were still some luggage space. If you think about things like people carriers and minivans, there was virtually no boot space at the back there at all when they're set up for carrying 8 people. And of course you can, like the traditional estate, you can remove the back seat or fold the back seat down or increase it by, it's like we can fold one of the seats down or all the seats to make this huge sort of van area to make a really practical car. So the 505 family estate, and estate, I think the rest of the world call these station wagons, don't they? Is it just the UK that calls them estates? I think there's not many. I think more commonly we would say station wagon in the rest of the world. Don't know where estate came from the UK, but everyone in the UK would think of these as estates. The family version is identical in design and external appearance to the basic estate, but has a third row of seats, so it can carry 8 people, all of them facing forwards. And that's quite a big thing. A lot of estates at this time, they had the rear facing, which wasn't particularly pleasant when you were driving along going backwards, but also I would say not as safe as a forward facing seat. But its unique feature is the versatile nature of the layout. Both sets of seats fold down completely to provide a flat, huge area of interrupted space. In addition, the second row of rear seats is split into a double and single section, so you can carry both passengers and long loads. And then the next page, it's talking about the choice between the estate or the family estate, and this is that very base model. We'll come back to that in a moment. I think we'll just read some of this text first. So it tells us estate or family estate, the choice is yours. One of them will match your requirements, whether it's for a large family or the demands of an occupation or pastime. What's more, there are a total of 5 model options available. The petrol-driven GL, GR and family estates, and the diesel-powered GR and family versions. The 1971cc petrol engine will be available with a 4-speed gearbox in the GL and GR, and with a 5-speed gearbox in the family. The 2498cc diesel engine GRD and family versions will both have a 5-speed gearbox. I'm kind of like thinking those diesels would be the one to have. Power assisted steering is available as standard on all versions except the GL. Both the petrol and diesel engines have one thing in common: the Peugeot hallmark of robustness and versatility at all speeds. And the availability of a 5-speed gearbox ensures excellent fuel economy, particularly on long journeys. So there is a quick look at that very basic GL, and remember, no power steering. Must have been a little bit of a fight to park that. Obviously you've got a big vehicle. If you're going to reverse park, parallel parking in particular with no power steering, that must have been quite a battle. Unusual as well, the petrol engine's non-family version only came with that 4-speed gearbox. You had to move up to the family version with the extra seats to get the 5-speed. That's a little bit weird, but like I say, I think the diesels were the one to get, and they came with the 5-speed gearbox anyway. And then we got a couple of higher spec versions there to one side. And then as we turn the page, unusually it's actually going to tell us about that very basic GL. So let's move straight to the text. And of course the main thing about the GL is you've got the most room for the least amount of money. I guess that's one of the selling points. So the 1971cc petrol engine develops 82 bhp at 5,000 rpm and has a 4-speed manual gearbox. The rear seats fold flat to give over 32 square foot of load space, and it obviously goes on to tell you about that space. The fascia is comprehensively equipped with gauges and warning lights. There's also headlamp level adjustment control, reversing lights and a rear demister. The front seats are contoured to give maximum comfort, and the mat pockets, capacious glove compartments and push button radio all combine to give the front compartment an atmosphere of practical luxury. And you can see straight away there's not really told you about any sort of equipment because it really didn't have very much at all. We do get to see a look at those front seats, which actually look really quite comfortable, although you note there is no head restraints. There is the headlamp levelling system, But it's all about that space, isn't it? And indeed, this space in this case has been taken up with a large dog. The next page then moves us up to a more reasonable spec model, and probably the model you probably would have gone for, the GR or GRD Estates. Let's have a look at the text. So the GRD Estates, 1971cc petrol for the GR, 96 bhp at 5200 rpm, sadly with the 4-speed manual gearbox. The instrument of the GR incorporates an econoscope so that the thoughtful driver can keep an eye on fuel consumption and achieve maximum miles per gallon of petrol. And then the model I think I would have preferred, the 2498cc Peugeot diesels, available in the GRD Estate, 76 bhp, 4500 rpm, and mated to a 5-speed manual gearbox this time. It's telling us it offers exceptional economical motoring. And a little bit of a look at the dash, and similar to the saloon cars, everything's there you need, and it's not particularly an attractive interior, but it's certainly a very robust, and it looks like something that would last reasonably well, and everything seems quite logically laid out. We've moved up a trim level, so we do get the rear wash wipe, which I think is pretty much essential on an estate. A look at the diesel 5-speed gear knob. A little bit of a look at the door mirror there as well. Next page continues talking about the GR and GRD Estates. Quite a nice looking interior actually, looks very hard wearing seats those. Tells us these entirely new cars are uniquely capacious and practical, but retain the full luxury standards of comfort and equipment found in the universally praised 505 saloons. The specially lengthened wheelbase, common to all versions of the 505 Estate, and the superb Peugeot suspension system provide an equalled combination of ride and road holding. And then we get a list of the GR standard equipment, so power assisted steering, which I think is pretty much essential on a car like this, so that's why I think you would have to at least move up to the GR. Halogen headlamps, electronic digital clock, panel light rheostat, tweed seat trim, which like I say looks very nice, very comfortable. I'm sure it's quite hard wearing. Hockey stick armrests, fully carpeted floor, laminated windscreen, tinted glass, radio cassette player, illuminated ignition keyhole, internally adjustable door mirrors, front seat head restraints, trip meter and tailgate wash wipe. So I think quite nice spec overall. A quick look at the heating and ventilation system and a couple of the extra little switches, and again we've got that adjustable headlight. And then the brochure moves on to look at the family versions, those big 8-seater family estates. Okay, so the 505 family petrol and diesel estates, both these models have the seating capacity of a family estate, 8 people, and the bulk carrying capacity of an ordinary estate. But they also offer you all the comforts of a saloon. The individual front seats with head restraints are fully reclining. The second row of seats folds down in 2 parts, one double, one single. Finally, the third row folds flat as well. The total load floor area is over 28 square foot, etc, etc. All the seats are covered in luxurious tweed, and the floor area is completely covered in carpet. Mat pockets on the back of the front seats, front door pockets, internally adjustable door mirrors and a radio cassette player are all standard. And there are all those 3 rows of seats, mat pockets, door pockets. You'll need all those extra bits with a family, and a bit of a zoom in what those seats look like inside the car itself. And then finally we get one more page looking at these family petrol and diesel estates, and it continues to tell us with 8 seats all forward facing, everyone can enjoy a comfortable ride. With 2 rows of folding seats, it's the only fully converting estate available and offers you the greatest volume capacity. The petrol version has a 1971cc engine developing 96 bhp with a 5-speed manual gearbox, because remember, because we're getting the family one, even the petrol gets the 5-speed manual gearbox and power assisted steering as standard. There's an Econoscope for economical motoring too, so similar story to the normal estate. The diesel version has 2498cc, 76 bhp, 5-speed, manual gearbox and power assisted steering. A digital clock, internal adjustable halogen headlamps and childproof rear door locks are all standard. Then we've got the 5-speed gear lever, which looks very peculiar at that angle, doesn't it? And then we've got that Econoscope, which is those 3 lights to keep an eye on your economy. Digital clock, adjustable headlights, of course. Talking about those headlights, I always like the design of those front headlights on the 505. And a look at the rear, and certainly gives you an idea, even on the 3rd row though, there's still got a bit of room for luggage, which really shows how long these cars are. This particular one, a GR, of course. Very well laden up with the family. And then we get this rather nice x-ray of the 505 estate, which is quite pleasant, isn't it? We've also got some quite wordy actually text talking about mechanical features and active and passive safety features. Not going to read all that because it's very wordy, so let's just pick a few key points. Here it's talking again about the petrol and diesel engines. It says a diesel engine, of course, even more economical and can manage over 44 miles per gallon at a constant 56, which isn't bad really considering what a big vehicle these are. Gearbox 4 or 5-speed gearbox, power assisted steering on all but that base model, and a diagnostic socket for the petrol engines. And active safety features, there's independent coil sprung suspension at the front, telescopic hydraulic shock absorbers and an anti-roll bar. The rear has coil spring suspension with anti-roll bar, except that base GL, and telescopic hydraulic shock absorbers. Brakes are dual circuit, servo assisted with discs at the front, drums at the rear. The brakes are automatically adjusted every time they are applied, resulting in maximum effectiveness. And it says finally there's both a brake fluid loss warning light and a brake wear warning light on the fascia. There were of course the active safety features. The passive safety features, what's it telling us? The front and rear sections of the state are designed to crumple and absorb the impact of a crash. Steering column is collapsible. Dash and fascia are padded. Nothing really out of the ordinary. In fact, when we're looking at safety features of these older cars compared to today, you can see how much safety has moved on. It's got an exceptional large window area, giving great views. Headlamp adjustment, of course. Rear demister, rear fog lamps, etc, etc. Showing us we get a 6-year anti-corrosion guarantee and showing how it gets dipped, etc. And I don't think 505s were too bad actually at resisting rust. I think they were certainly above average. And then finally at the back page we get the specifications and equipment, which I think we've pretty much covered in the brochure already, and the brochure review is getting quite long, so we'll just pick a couple of the key points out, I think. So there are all our models laid out, starting with the estate, which you could be had with that lowly GL, GR or GRD. So the petrol engines, of course, the GRL and the GR, shown side by side, both having that 1971cc engine. But you can see the GL getting 82 bhp at 5,000 rpm, the GR having 96 bhp at 5,200 rpm, just showing again how basic that GL model was, very much stripped out. It's a single choke compared to a double choke version for the GR. And of course we've got the GRD, the diesel, 76 bhp at 4,500 rpm. The family versions just split up by 2 models, so the same spec, but the petrol or the diesel, whichever one you preferred. And then lower down you can see the transmission, so the GL and the GR just having that 4-speed for the petrol versions, the rest of the models getting 5-speed, which was certainly an advantage, I would say. And it goes on to give information about the steering. It's power steering on all but that base model, which I'm sure if you had that model you would wish you had the power steering. Gives you an idea of the turning circle there as well. Looks like the turning circle is better, though not having the power steering on there, which is interesting. All the fuel economy figures right at the bottom there, and of course showing the difference between a petrol engine and a diesel engine. But I think even the petrol engine is quite reasonable. First column is, so the first two columns are the petrol, then we get a diesel, next one's a petrol, and the last column is the diesel again. Urban cycle really is where the diesel kind of like wins through. So there you go, the estate versions of these 505s. Thank you for those who requested this, and I hope they've enjoyed this episode. And indeed, those who missed the saloon version, I will put a link at the end of this episode. For me, certainly a very interesting car. I would have loved to have at least driven one, but sadly I haven't. But if you remember these cars, if you own one, if you drove one, please let me know your thoughts about that. Certainly very interesting to read as always. And of course, if you've not done it already, please consider subscribing. It is completely free, and you can actually even click the little bell on there, and it kind of like reminds you when new episodes comes up, and of course remind you that Quarterlight is here to show you car brochures from around the world for the 60s, 70s, 80s and 90s. I've also added a couple of squares there, the little boxes for other videos. I've included the saloon version of the 505, of course, if you missed that one, and one other video there as well. But most of all, thank you so much for watching today's video. Hope you're all well. Please do take care, and goodbye.